Hey guys, it's Stephen Freeborn here from freeborntrainingsystems.com. And real quick, I just wanted to give you a tip about performing your high intensity interval training correctly. I know that HIIT has become a very popular method of conditioning the last few years, and definitely for good reason. It's been shown to be effective for improving aerobic as well as anaerobic measures of work capacity and conditioning. It's also been shown to be very beneficial for fat loss, and it's also much more efficient as a form of training compared to your kind of typical aerobic conditioning, which usually takes 45 to 60 minutes. HIIT can typically be done in a half to a third of the time of that kind of traditional conditioning approach, which makes it a great tool for somebody who's busy but looking to stay in great shape and also perform well as part of kind of a tool in their toolbox. But the thing is, I think a lot of the times what happens is people kind of botch it in its execution with good intention, though. Interval training often turns into just a higher intensity, steady state cardio session. So instead of seeing elevations in heart rate followed by a recovery to a lower heart rate, we kind of usually end up just seeing this one constant high heart rate because they never give themselves enough time to recover and aren't monitoring their work periods correctly. So I think it's important that we understand that for it to be true interval training, we need to see these highs and these lows with our heart rate. And heart rate's usually how we look at intensity when we talk about conditioning, because it's a very easy way to measure level of physiological effort and output in a typical gym setting. That being said, I think most people do this with all the good in mind. They know that HIIT training should feel difficult and hard, and it should while you're actually working during those high intensity intervals. But during your rest intervals, you should be recovering back to a certain baseline. It shouldn't be one big giant suck session the whole time through. And that's where it turns into more of like a high intensity, steady state cardio that's more glycolytic or more kind of high threshold aerobic training. And that's not really the kind of stimulus we're trying to apply when we're talking HIIT. So to give you a good example of this is when we see somebody who does a traditional HIIT training session, what we should see if we're looking at their heart rate and looking at a graph of it is we should see these elevations followed by these nice big valleys, so peaks and valleys all the way throughout their training session for how many ever intervals they're going to do. However, what happens a lot of the times is people tend to do their first interval, which looks usually great, but it's that second interval where things start going awry because fatigue has started to accumulate. So they work up to that same heart rate, but now their rest isn't sufficient enough. So they only get down to maybe 75% of fully recovered, and then they're doing their next interval. Well, they're not recovered, so they're not able to redouble that same effort. So maybe they can only get close to, again, 75% of that max heart rate they were shooting for. Again, fatigue accumulates, and they end up not being able to rest enough to come down, and they end up never being able to put forth the same amount of effort to get back to where they wanted. So we just end up with these really small, tiny peaks and valleys for the rest of the session. And like I said, it turns into just a high intensity, steady state cardio session. Ideally, the way you can prevent this is by using a heart rate monitor so that you're for sure forcing yourself to make this kind of a graph where you're going to work until you get to a certain heart rate, and then you're going to rest until you get to a certain heart rate. You're not going to use arbitrary work to rest ratios. You're just going to let your heart rate dictate that for you. And then over time, you should notice that it takes less time for you to come to the valley, and it should take more and more time for you to get to the high peak, because your body's becoming better conditioned, more conditioned, but can recover faster, and it takes greater amounts of effort to get your heart rate up that high. But another way to do this, to account for the need for kind of ascending rest periods and descending maybe work periods or work effort during those periods, is to just build that into your program. So as the fatigue accumulates throughout your intervals, you're going to need more rest, and it's probably not going to take as much effort to get you up to that heart rate, that high heart rate, because you're tired. So what you could do is for your first 3 intervals is you could set a work to rest ratio of 30 seconds, say 30 seconds. So that's 1 to 1. And then because now we know that after those first 3, fatigue is going to start to accumulate, on our 4th through 6th intervals, we can account for that by adjusting our work to rest ratio. So now we're going to go 30 seconds to 60 seconds. So now we've got a 1 to 2 ratio. So we're accounting for that fatigue, giving ourselves more time to recover so we can redouble that effort and get a nice big high peak and a nice low valley. And then because fatigue continues to accumulate, say for interval 7 through 9, we're going to take it to a 30-second to 90-second rest. So 1 to 3 work to rest ratio. And this helps you account for that accumulating fatigue and make sure that you're able to fully recover and fully redouble that effort. It shouldn't be one big, long, sucking wind session. It should feel very hard during the work period, and then you should feel like sucking wind at the end of the work period. You should start to feel better and better during your rest. You should get all the way back to your baseline rest heart rate and then take off again. And if you're not doing that, if you're not getting those peaks and valleys, then you're not actually getting the real benefits of true interval training, anaerobic interval training, and you just end up hanging out in that kind of high aerobic threshold training or glycolytic event, and which there's a time and place for that kind of conditioning. But for those of you trying to get the most out of your HIIT, this is what you need to do to make sure that you are actually performing high intensity interval training. I hope this helps. I hope it makes sense. I hope I explained it well enough for you. If not, if you have questions or want to clarify things, please let me know. Ask questions. I'll be happy to talk more about it. But until then, I hope you guys keep kicking ass at life. Have a great day. Have a great rest of your week, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye.